Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we turn to talking about the Academy Awards, or more commonly known as the Oscars here in America. Winning an award at this world-famous ceremony was once considered one of the highest achievements in the film industry. But over the years, things have become more and more political there, and more liberal and social justice-y. That brings us to this year's show, which is set to air about a week from now, on February 24th. I've been waiting to talk about this story too, ever since the nominations came out about a week or two ago. And now that it's getting closer to the show, I think it's finally time we talk about these nominations. There were some interesting choices this year to say the least. Particularly, Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture this year, and I gotta say right out the gate, this move really confuses me. I can't say I'm completely surprised either though, since there was so much hype about Black Panther last year. We covered a number of the stories about the hype, the release, and the ensuing drama at the time. Links to my original Black Panther videos below, but basically, this movie was a super big deal for some people, because it was the first black Marvel superhero movie. Well, if you don't count the 3 Blade movies starring Wesley Snipes that came out in the 90s and early 2000s. Regardless, Black Panther became a bit of a movement over time. It grossed a shitload of money and people are still gabbing about it to this day. But was it one of the best movies of last year, of 2018? Possibly, but it depends on who you ask. And it's certainly not what I would consider Best Picture material. Even putting it on a top 10 list, which is what these nominations basically are now, well, even that's questionable. Let's not forget, this is the first Marvel comic book movie to ever get this big of a nomination at the Oscars. But in my opinion, this isn't even close to being a top comic book movie, let alone a top Marvel movie. Shit, it's not even the best Marvel movie from last year. Avengers Infinity War would certainly top it, if you ask me. And there's also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I thought was a better movie too, but it is animated and it was nominated for Best Animated Oscar, so we'll see how that one goes. It's also worth noting that Spider-Verse was led by a black Spider-Man. Just saying, that sounds random now, but it comes up later. You see, back to Black Panther. So, this movie wasn't the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, nor was it the best comic book movie either. So why was Black Panther nominated for the Best Picture Oscar? Well, I think it's a combination of things really, and we're going to go over all of it today too, but first, let's start with the first and most obvious reason. Black Panther is a black-led movie that was really hot with leftists and social justice warriors who saw it as a big deal for the black communities across the globe. So while I may have saw it as a B-level superhero movie that recycled a lot of the same plot points from Iron Man and Batman, well, many others saw Black Panther as a black movement, and the Oscars giving the nomination here is clearly a nod to say, hey, we're down with the blacks too. Go Africa, Wakanda forever. And hell, if you take a look at the other nominations, it's pretty clear this year was big for the blacks. Or at least it was a big time for the stuffy rich white liberals to pander to them from Hollywood. As I mentioned before, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a black-led movie that's nominated for the Best Animated Picture Oscar. And well, there are also 2 or 3 black-led movies nominated for Best Picture overall. For example, besides Black Panther, there's also BlacKkKlansman, along with another movie called Green Book, which stars another black man right below it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give the Green Book a pass before we move on. It stars the very talented and very versatile Mahershala Ali, and combine him with Viggo Mortensen, and I have no doubt the Green Book is Oscar worthy. But Black Panther and BlacKkKlansman in here is very questionable, especially put together. One or the other might be okay. It would still be a pity diversity nomination to pander to blacks, but squeezing one in there makes sense. But now, having both seems like it sends a whole other message. The way I see it, this is a way for Hollywood to stick it to our president, kind of. And now, forgive me if that seems like a bit of a stretch or it's coming out of nowhere, but if you've seen these movies, you would understand this more. While Black Panther is more just about being pro-black in Africa, without really shitting on anyone else too much, although there are some anti-white lines snuck in there by the Shuri character, don't forget, but that's nothing compared to BlacKkKlansman. This one is pretty much straight up anti-President Trump. Even the director Spike Lee said he hoped his movie would bring down the Trump administration. The end of that movie even has all kinds of clips from Charlottesville and shit like that. And the whole message here is, the whole point of BlacKkKlansman is that race relations haven't changed in America since the 1970s, which is obviously a load of bullshit. And while we're talking about it, here's a clip from the director of that movie, Spike Lee, where he tries to say that slavery is still an issue in America.
We've never really honestly dealt with slavery. Once we start to have an honest discussion on slavery, then we can move forward. We've never really had honest discussions about the foundation of this country. I know people might not like this, but this is the truth.
Well, I think we dealt with slavery pretty good during the Civil War in the 1860s. You know, that little tiff where hundreds of thousands of white Americans died in order to free the black slaves and unify this country. So I say, get out of here with that we need to deal with slavery bullcrap, Spike Lee. Slavery ended 150 years ago, so if anyone needs to deal with it, it's probably you. You're the grown-ass man in his 60s still talking about a concept that you learned about in middle school. Spike and his stupid glasses they've never seen or met or heard from anyone who had anything to do with actual slavery. So I say this is a goddamn joke. And his movie here, BlacKkKlansman, it should have never been considered for Best Picture. It's a stupid gimmicky movie that's actually a little bit boring and uneventful when you get down to it. And I'll get back to Black Panther specifically in a minute, but this other black movie is related too, like I said. And if you actually saw it like me, needless to say, I wasn't too impressed with Spike Lee's movie. Not only was it overly political and boring, like I mentioned, but also it's kind of based on an old, certain gimmick. Something I noticed that's been going around again lately. The setup for the movie is basically, there's a black cop who does this fake white voice on the phone to trick people into talking to him about crimes and stuff. And this of course is strikingly similar to another movie from last year, Sorry to Bother You, which came out just a few months before Spike Lee's movie. And Sorry to Bother You has another black person who does another white voice on the phone, this time in order to trick people into buying things from him. And this of course also harps back to the many famous black stand-up comedians who have done white voice jokes in their acts over the years. I particularly remember Dave Chappelle doing a few funny bits like this that actually were hilarious and not offensive at all. And well, I'm not here to say this new stuff offends me either, but it is very gimmicky. And it's rather funny that two white voice movies came out last year, only months apart from each other. Sure, Spike Lee's movie tries to pretend it's more serious and not about that gimmick too much, but if you watch the trailer, the whole premise is hinged on the white voice gimmick. So with that said, you could also say the whole premise is to make fun of and put down whites. And while I'm not necessarily offended by this personally, you better bet your ass Spike Lee and his SJW friends, they would take offense if we started making movies of white people doing black voice. They'd call it blackface or something racist like that. Double standards much? Regardless, the final point about Spike Lee's movie is this. It's about dissing white people, particularly the president, which they even go after at the very end of the movie, specifically. And while Black Panther plays it much safer and better, there are certainly a number of screw white moments in that movie too. So these movies go hand in hand if you ask me, and that's why they're both nominated for Best Picture this year too. The Academy does this from time to time to try and pander to minorities, because the movie industry wants to look hip and woke and progressive, but also now they need to try and pander to SJWs even more than ever. You see, another reason the Oscars are pandering so much this year is because their show has been struggling to get good ratings forever now. Award shows in general have all seen large declines in ratings, but the Oscars in particular have been sliding downhill fast. I think it's really been hard for them to come back after screwing up the Best Picture announcement in 2017. 2 years ago, these two old bozos announced the wrong movie for Best Picture. How embarrassing. The biggest award of the night, and we had to sit through these kinds of awkward shenanigans.
Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
Moonlight won. Come on, this is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm afraid they read the wrong thing.
This is not a joke. Moonlight has won Best Picture. Moonlight, Best Picture.
So, needless to say, since then it's been harder and harder to take the Oscars seriously. But also, there's been even more worse news coming out about the show lately. You see, originally, actor and comedian Kevin Hart was set to host the show this year. And I have to say, that actually made me consider watching it this year too. Hart can be pretty hilarious, but before I could get too into it, the Academy immediately decided to pull Kevin from the show. Apparently, after announcing him, some SJW Twitter sleuths decided to go over all of Kevin Hart's online history. They eventually found some gay joke he made over 10 years ago, and well, that was all it took to scrub Hart from the show completely. What a joke, and not a funny one either. And after Kevin Hart was forced out over nothing, well, no one else really wanted to follow up and host after that. Hosting the Oscars is already a thankless, boring job no one wants anyway, and now that people know you will come under fire from SJWs if you even get considered, well, that's reason enough for everyone in Hollywood to stay away. In fact, it's so heated and controversial to host the show now that the Oscars couldn't even get a host at all this year. There's going to be no host in this show, win, and that's the first time this show will go hostless in a long time. Last time there wasn't a host, it didn't go so well either, so I guess we'll see. Really, the only thing that can save this kind of show is a good comedian, but the left-wingers blew that chance already by being PC and stupid. In the end, I think even just the fact that they considered a black man as a host says something too. Combine that with the other black movies and artists nominated this year, and well, we can see why Black Panther got nominated for Best Picture. It's a big year for blacks, clearly, in the Oscars at least. And certainly we can at least admit that this is somewhat reactionary to the president, and of course, the rise of his conservative base, like many of us. And even though we're not racist or we don't hate minorities, that's the way the left sees it, so they want to prop them up now to defy us, supposedly. But they're really just defying a straw man they've created of us. And yes, this year's Oscar appears to be getting more political like this too, in part as a reaction to all the losing on the liberal side. This makes the more hopeful leftists try and step up and shine for themselves, in spite of us, who they see as their opposition. What do you guys think? Should Black Panther be nominated for Oscars? What movie do you think will win Best Picture this year? And do you think this year's Oscars without a host will do well? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you all next time.